Allegiance. Or is it?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome to the third annual Quilt Turn. I would like to introduce a special guest first. Before we get started, I would like Lily Weiser to come up for just a moment. Lily? I'm sure you've seen her walking around here, and I want her to explain to you her official position today.
Hi everybody, I would like to welcome you to this event. I am Miss Potawatomi. I was recognized as Miss Potawatomi by the Fair Board last August, and I'm excited to be here. I have never quilted nor received a quilt, so I'm new to all of this, but I'm happy to be here and excited to meet all of you.
I don't think she realized I was going to put her on the spot. I told her she should go call her grandma Marcia to come down here and listen and get her a quilt for next year. And I also told her, I says, you know, there's a bunch of grandmas out here today. You might have 10 quilts by this time next year. I would like to read just a paragraph to you. It's called What Makes a Quilt So Special by Debbie Anderson Searles, Surely, when the final stitch is entered and the needle laid to rest, only a quilter can know the feeling of pride soaring within her or his soul. He or she has the contentment of knowing that a long, hard journey has come to an end. She or he has conquered a challenge and through their own patience and endurance has created a loving work of art. It may well live on long after he or she has finished their walk upon this earth. And I think that will speak to what we will see today in the stories of the quilts that have been brought in. Before we turn our first quilt, though, I would like to just go through a couple of logistics. The restrooms are out in the foyer, thank you, in case you need those, and feel free to get up and go to the restroom when you need to. If you have completed your icebreaker mixer, or when you do, be sure to put it in the basket up here. There'll be a prize for one of those we'll draw out. The door prizes, I think you have already found out that you can buy extra tickets if you want to. It's entirely up to you. If you are in the audience and provided a door prize, would you put up your hand and wave? We want to thank those people that have taken the time to bring us some door prizes. There are quilt tickets being sold for the Ukrainian quilt. It's got kind of a neat story to it. The quilt was won by one of our volunteers at the museum at an auction in Kansas City where they were raising money to provide sewing skills to young people so that they could go to work in the garment industry in Kansas City. The money on that, all of that money will go to UNICEF Ukraine. There are a whole bunch of free will donations in the entryway. Please look those over, because if you're the last one to leave today, they are all going home with you. That is still on that table. Please look those over. For those of you that don't know, the Onega Historical Society runs these monthly garage sales from April through October, helping to raise money for our building fund right now. And we have some marvelous stuff brought in, but if any of you have ever run a garage sale, what is left over is still marvelous. In fact, the glasses on the table today, even the crystal ones, were all things we could not sell in our garage sale. So they're washed up, don't worry, they're clean. So we are thankful for that avenue of revenue for our museum. After the quilts are turned, we will put them over here on the tables. So those of you that want to, at break time, those of you that want to kind of look at the block and how it's put together a little closer, you may do that. We'll try to do that. We have just a few quilts that are on display this year and a couple out in the foyer that you can look at also. I think that's all the logistics, unless the planning committee realizes I forgot to say something. So with that, I'm going to read the last paragraph of the article that I just started for you, What Makes a Quilt So Special. And I'm going to stand here by this quilt that comes from our museum. I was looking for quilts to bring, to share, and I don't know, how many of you work in a museum somewhere? You'll never find everything in your museum, I can guarantee it. I didn't realize we had this quilt until I was looking for something to bring, and it's an 1842 quilt made in New York State. Why it is in the Onega Museum, I have no clue. I Googled, there is a name, I Googled it. How many of you Google names frequently, and sometimes you hit it and sometimes you don't? There's more work to be done here. But this quilt, as I looked at it, made me think of this. Perhaps what makes a quilt so special is that pride a quilter knows, that deep in their heart he or she knows some distant future generation might gaze upon her or his quilt and touch its fragile threads and still feel the love and care that he or she has sewn in every stitch. And for me, that's what this quilt now represents in our museum. We don't know the generations yet, we might, but think from 1842 to today, that's 182 years. So we're looking at several generations that we can wonder what the story was. So with that, I will turn it over to our quilt turning group. And I'm going to let, we need Kathy Martin and Barb Depew, May Wagner, and Dee Groff are our quilt turners. So I'll let you get on stage. We are going to start with the newest quilts, I believe.
And we'll be asking those as you come up to stand right in this area here for filming.
Or maybe a little bit to this stage for that. When you come up, be sure to give your name and where you're from before you talk about your quilt. And if we could keep it to about 2 minutes, that would be great. Or
Yeah.
Just need a name.
The tags there. Diane. The light's right. She's coming right there, Diane. I'm Diane Dysert, and I have an old quilt, and I've made 2 reproductions of my great-grandmother's quilt. And this is my most recent, and I did it scrappy. I enlarged the pattern a little bit to fit modern-day beds because Grandma's was a lot smaller. So this is my most recent. Beautiful. Thank you.
and you may clap after.
This is the Brewer quilt number 2 that I made. And I learned from this one, this is the same pattern as that one, and the same as my great-grandmother's, but I learned that I was very dark and like the mediums, very few brights and very few lights. So that's why I made number 3 to try to expand my repertoire.
Did you quilt it, machine quilt it yourself?
No, I did not. I had a friend do that. Thank you.
Hey, this is from Rosie, if you'll come up.
Rosie Bossy, Onega, Kansas. I don't quilt, period. But I write books, and this is a reproduction of a Civil War quilt. This is actually order number 11, and that was when the 4 counties on the border of Kansas and Nebraska were evacuated on the Missouri side because the Union Army was tired of all the fighting back and forth. That's actually where my Civil War story is going to start, and so I was talking to Jeannie Dowd from Oldsburg, and she offered to make this quilt for me. Now, you guys that are quilters, there's a name for this pattern, and I don't remember what it was. But anyway, it's typically hand applique, and so Jeannie did everything by hand with the exception of the border out here on the outside. So all of her application is done by hand. Her quilting is all done by hand. She also tried to pick fabrics and colors that were reproductions of Civil War quilts. But it's kind of a cool thing because during the Civil War, the quilts were a very valued entity. So when the Union Army, the Redlegs, when they came into these Confederate homes, or the Confederates too, for that matter, but during the Redlegs were the ones that came in on the General Order 11. They would have pulled the quilts off the beds and taken them with them to use as bedding. And so the story is where this design came from. This young girl was 10 years old and watched her mother's best quilt be pulled off the bed. She called it was jayhawked, she said. And so it was pulled off the bed and taken with them. So some of the women, when they knew that the soldiers were coming, they kept a big tub of water by the door and they would soak their quilts, which made it way too heavy for them to take with them. And that's how they could save their quilts. So, yeah.
This is Janet. Yes.
I'm Janet Finney, and I made this quilt for my grandson in Arkansas. And I got the pattern several years ago. And when I bought the pattern, it's an Elizabeth Hartman pattern. And when I bought it, I thought the bears were appliqued. So when I opened the pattern and realized they were pieced, I was like, oh my gosh. So it took me a while, and I decided that we wanted to get it to him while he was still a child. So I did every other bears, but the bears are not square. So then I had to come up with a pattern that would fit. And my friend Patty Sexton came to my rescue and had me make the shoe fly? Yeah, the shoe fly bar. So anyway, but you know, the pattern was very well written. Everyone should take a lesson from her on how to write those patterns. If you followed the pattern and you were very organized and labeled everything, it went together really very easily. It just took time. It wasn't something you chain pieced. So, and I did a pillow to practice, and I gave the pillow to Caleb, and Caleb had a bear, a stuffed bear from since he was a child, and he'll be 10 in June. He still has it. And he got the pillow, And as soon as he got the pillow, he ran and got his bear. And I had made him a small quilt for his bear, and he laid the bear on the pillow and covered it up. And he told me, of all the pillows you've made me, this is my favorite. So I think he'll like the pattern. And Sarah Hoffman, who lives by Westmoreland, quilted it for me. She's a wonderful quilter. She's in her 30s. She is wonderful for us older ladies. She gets us out of trouble when we find ourselves. And this one is mine too. This was,
We're trying to keep it off the ground.
oh, well, that's all right. She made it, this is it was 2 jelly rolls, and a friend of mine gave me the technique on making it. And so I used the 2 jelly rolls and border fabric. And it went together pretty easily, but you did have bias seams, but it worked out okay. But so it wasn't really a pattern, it was just what he showed me to do, and I'm not sure I could do it again without him being there to tell me what to do. And I called it Happy Days because I thought the fabrics were just happy to look at.
Did you hear that question, Janet?
What's that?
The length, how long did it take you to do the quilt?
You know, not all that long. I did the blocks on a couple retreats, and then I laid them out, and sewing it together, it took longer because I didn't work on it solidly. You know, I work on, then I have another quilt that has a deadline or something, and then I go back. But I did the blocks at a couple retreats, so not as long as you would think. Yeah. Now, this one is, I'm speaking for my Aunt Dorothy, who said that it was too hard, and it is hard for her to come up. But Aunt Dorothy Guth lives in Womago. She was Dorothy Swamp Guth, and she's my aunt. And this one was, the blocks were done by Grandma Bossy, Amelia Bossy, and Aunt Dorothy bought. She set the blocks together, and she bought the fabric at Mandy's, right? Yeah, I don't know if any of you remember Mandy's in Oneida. Yeah. And Mrs. Moran hand quilted it. But we can't remember Mrs. Moran's first name. She lived between Blaine and Wheaton. Tom is her husband's name, but I can't remember her. I don't know if anybody remembers. Anyway, that's how this quilt, and Aunt Dorothy has it now.
Aunt Dorothy, would you wave your hand?
This is a neat one.
Pretty colors. Yeah. Okay. So Lisa, you're going to tell us a story.
So it has the name there it says, to Brandon and Lisa with love from Mom Spivak, Aunt Dee Spencer, July 25th, 2009. That's when we got married. So this is a wedding gift from my husband's mother and his aunt. So they used a lot of blocks, the material sorry, I get nervous. Things that are special to us. There's music, Dorothy's shoes, corn, sheep, chickens, wheat. So it's like just supposed to be representative of Brandon and I. So anyway, that's all. Okay.
Yeah, I'll fall down first. Okay, Delta Martin, I'm sure a lot of you remember Delta. Delta made quilts galore, and I have another one in here in a little while. But when she had her first granddaughter, she'd gone 40 years with just sons and grandsons. So this is actually one that she made for Annie. Now she didn't, Tina has hers, she won't give it to me. But this one is still at home because Annie hasn't taken hers yet. So anytime she could do something in pink, she did things in pink, very much so. So yeah, this, it's a very typical type of a quilt, but they're all treasured in our house. We have quite a few, and they're all treasured.
Dee, I'm going to give you this so you can tell the story.
I'm Dee Groff, and this is my quilt. We actually did a class, and we had 4 different people in the class, and everyone chose a different color path. And so all of them looked completely different. I wanted to do one with batik, so this is done with batiks and white on white.
Very nice. That's awesome.
Debbie.
She knew she was.
This is absolutely nothing real special. Several of us sew together once in a while. Dee Groff is one, and she knows I love to chain stitch. And so whenever I'm working on another project, like a reversible table runner, I always have my pile of scraps there that I'll sew together. How many of you do that? And then you get done and you've got this pile of scraps, you think, oh, now what? So this is just some scrappy stuff that I had that I was chain stitching while I was doing something else. I had thought I would give this to the orphan grain train, but does anyone see anything in that quilt that will prevent me from doing that?
The flag.
The American flag is in that particular quilt. And I understand for the orphan grain train, you don't want anything that would be politically related. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this quilt. I may give it to the Down syndrome for a raffle. I might give it to a grandson. I might just keep it. I had fun putting it together. There are quilt scraps out there for a free will donation for those of you that don't have enough scraps. You can get some more.
You went back, oh, you know.
I am Nancy Hubbard from Flush. Hope you don't know where that's at. I inherited, here.
And we do have it folded over, it's so huge.
Yeah, it's big. I inherited a pile of sugar, flour, feed sacks from Grandma and Great-Grandma.
Oh, wow.
This is a sack, okay? Now, when I was a teenager, we made clothes out of the sacks. But when we cleaned out Mom's house, I took them all because I quilt. So I decided to make Grandma's fan using feed sacks. You can see how many colors there are. Okay? Now, you could get white feed sacks, but I didn't have enough for the background, so I had to buy a woven fabric that coordinated the weave. And then I decided, because Grandma always had a flower garden outside of the house, I would do a flower with the leaves. The flower was a pattern around, I just drew the leaves and I hand quilted it, because that's what great-grandma did, was hand quilt, and that's what I do. And then it wasn't on the back big enough, so I just used leftover feed sack fabric to put a big enough back.
And we'd like to know how long it took you to make this.
Well, a couple of years. But I like to just sit and quilt.
Nancy, when did they start making the colored feed sacks?
Oh, in the Depression, the history is the Depression era, 1929 to 1940. Okay, and they were 50 to 100 pound contents. Then, when they made the white ones, and then they found out that women were making clothes, so they started making the printed feed sacks because it helped sell their product. So the 1920s were the biggest part, and then in 1950 they went to paper sacks. So that's, yes?
I remember seeing like a 50-pound bag of flour in the 50s, we were shopping with Mom.
Oh, you still have sacks from the 50s? Oh, well, Google told me that they went to paper.
We probably just had leftovers right here.
It takes a while.
How many of you in here grew up with some sack clothing? Hold up your hand. I know, I'm going to tell a little story on one of our volunteers, Reva Boswell. She shared with me one time that when her dad went to town to do the shopping for the family, her mom sent Reva along so that she would make sure they bought enough stuff in sacks that matched, so there would be enough fabric when they got home to make whatever they're going to do. Is that right, Reva? Okay, so I think it's fun to hear that, to see that history, and to see how many of you have some feed sack memories with that. Thank you. Okay, and chicken feed in them. Okay. Very good. Next person.
This quilt is from the St. Luke's Lutheran Quilting Group. I've only been a member for 3 years, and the lady that's been with the group the longest, which is over 25 years, said this thing has been sitting around and everybody's just been pushing it aside and pushing it aside. She actually tried to pawn it off with me the first year, and I kind of pushed it aside too. So finally, we had a lady join our group, and we brought it out and tried to push it over on her. And lo and behold, she was ready for the challenge. This is kind of unusual because it's not cotton. It's almost all nylon material. We called it the parachute quilt because that's what we thought it was probably made out of.
That's what it reminded us of.
Yeah. And the lady volunteered to take it because she had a kid's teepee tent that was made out of this material that she could use to patch all the holes. You know, when you sew with this kind of material, it really shreds, ravels real easily. So she went through, fixed all of the holes. Took her a couple of weeks. We kept sending it back because we found more holes. So I have no idea how old this is, but we do plan on donating it to the Orphan Grain Train.
I didn't want to claim it because it's not me. She's Ruth Caston. It's Ruth again.
This is another quilt that our quilting group from St. Luke's put together. We inherited the patterned blocks in some material that was donated to us. And we found out that there were plenty of blocks, but we had to make fillers. And the lady that sewed it together actually had these scraps with the Bible verses on it. And she put it together, and then we tied it as a group. And since it has religious sayings on it, we cannot donate it to the Orphan Grain Train, so we think maybe we might give it to the Crisis Center or something.
Can you explain the Orphan Grain Train? And what is your name?
I wasn't going to tell you my name because this is for the St. Luke's Lutheran ladies. But I am Ruth Caston, and I live in Omega. I'm the new bus driver's wife. The Orphan Grain Train gathers materials, shoes, clothing, food stuff, all kinds of stuff, and they distribute it nationwide and worldwide. A lot of it goes to Indian reservations, and they have gathering points. I think we send ours to Wichita.
Anything else? I
kind of like that.
But I want to claim it, though. It was started by a Lutheran.
Did we clap?
My name's Steve Staley. I live in Centralia. My wife lives. And our son Ray works down here at Ag and Auto. Some of you probably know him. But this quilt came about because this summer my son mentioned that his daughter's little baby quilt was getting too small. Well, we had been collecting doilies because I was going to make a quilt of valor for my nephew. And Debbie said, well, we've got these cross stitches, and so we got together and decided, well, if we take and use these for her quilt, and this little girl's only 4 years old, and we gave it to her for Christmas. So needless to say, she wasn't giving it up at Christmas time. But last week, they had to go to Concordia for their Christmas because they had their Christmas canceled because of sickness. And so they brought it up here to Onega again. And then Ray brought it home to us. And so now tomorrow, Grandma and Grandpa get to go see the grandkids in Kansas City. So this is a very well-traveled quilt. But we tied it instead of quilting it because she likes ties to play with while she's getting ready to go. And the colors on the back are her favorite colors, so.
Cross stitch on this. This is all cross stitch. It's amazing.
Who did the cross stitching?
Okay. I do not quilt. Absolutely do not quilt. Me and the sewing machine get together about well enough to make Halloween costumes is about it. But when I was about 10 or 11 years old, I've always had a thing for textures, and I've also always been somewhat ADHD, and so my hands have to go, my mind has to go. So when I was 11, I taught myself how to crochet. I had never been around crochet. My grandparents didn't, my mother didn't. I saw it at Ben Franklin's 5 and 10 in Holton, Kansas, if you can remember back when it was a dime store. I bought my first skein of yarn, then my first hook, then my first book. And so I have been crocheting for over 50 years. I wanted to make something special for my mother for her 85th birthday, and she loves black and white. And you can learn so much on YouTube anymore, it's really amazing.
I would have never attempted anything like this. But it's called Mandela Madness, and yes, it made me mad, and no, I cannot tell you how long it took me to make, because by the time I got around to the ends of it, it would take me about 2.5 to 3 hours to get around one border round. So a lot of love and stuff went into this, and I talked to Debbie last year about, it's a fiber art, it's not quilting, but yet in a way it resembles, putting parts together.
Scale with it.
Yeah, it is a quilt. And so anyway, like I say, YouTube has become my favorite thing. I have learned so much from YouTube. Before we hold it up, my oldest son Dave married a girl from Wichita, and her father was a Wichita City policeman. And about 3 months before Danielle was born, he was killed in the line of duty. So Danielle's mother raised Danielle on her own with the help of her mom and dad. And they lived on a farm, and so Danielle and Nancy, as her mother, are very close with mom and dad. Well, her mom died probably about 10 years ago. Her father passed away in March, and I'm one of these that I hate sending flowers because flowers die, or you have to take care of the plants. The money, donations are okay, but they never really get to see it. So I thought I want something special for her. So since she lived on the farm all of her life, this is called mosaic crocheting. I have learned how to do this in the last year. This is only the second quilt I've done. I did one for Annie and Noah that was books, but it was not near this complicated. This one, you could figure up the hours if you want to. It took me a half an hour per row. There are 240 some rows in it, and then the border probably took me another 15 to 20 hours to do. So this, it's not that big, but it is definitely a gift of love that I gave her. And to me, it's artwork. It's, you could hang it on a wall as a piece of artwork. And I just wanted to bring it up to show it off because I rarely get to show off my work, and this one was one and in the middle here in the heart, you can't see it very well, but are her parents' initials in the heart of it. So that was one of my treasures.
This is another one of my quilts. It was leftover Christmas fabrics from a variety of things that you can tell I could chain stitch them into a square and then put them together with bars. So there's nothing really unusual about that. How many of you have made a quilt and after you put the quilt where you want to put it, you think, oh my gosh, why didn't I make it one more row wider or one more row longer? That's this quilt. I wish I had made it one more row longer or wider, but I was out of fabric, and I wasn't going to go buy any. But one of the reasons I brought this quilt today is in your little registration packet, you should have received a color grabber. How many of you know what a color grabber is? How many of you have no clue what a color grabber is? Well, after today, you'll go home and you'll go to Walmart and you'll buy, or wherever you go, stock in color grabbers. Because I made this I think 3 years ago, I'm not sure. I never washed it. Well, this Christmas vacation, the grandkids seem to have found that bed more often to bounce on than anything else in the house. And as I looked at it, it needed to be washed. Well, how many of you think that would bleed? So I thought, well, this will be a good test of color grabbers. I washed it in cold water with a cup of white vinegar and 3 color grabbers. Now, if you look at that, I don't think it bled or faded. This is what my color grabbers looked like and grabbed. They're wonderful things, especially if you've got kids going off to college that have never really washed clothes much before. It will help them. I threw one in with some jeans I had, but I had a piece of red fabric, and I don't care if your jeans get faded or not. But I just was curious, and it did grab that much out of a washer load full of clothes. So that's why I brought that, is I wanted to show you the color grabbers can be bought a lot of places, and if you're not familiar with them, be sure to check with somebody that knows about them, because they really, for me, have been a lifesaver on washing things that you wonder how it's going to turn out. Thank you.
Well, you're lucky. My daughter came home for about a month in middle of December. She's kind of on the way to Michigan to finish up a doctorate, we all hope, in May, so she left her bedspread. This was made after she graduated from, I think actually the college here at K-State, and Janie Cottrell, if you know her from Centralia, took all her t-shirts, lined them up. She did kind of ask Emily to match them kind of the way she would like to see them put into it, and she accommodated that. And then she, I think we had to iron the fuse, I don't know what you call it, the interface or something first, and then we gave them to her, but and cut them out, and then she pieced it together, and then I don't know if it's been a little while. I think I put the border and then the corners on it so it would be a little bit bigger for her, for the bed, and then I had Dee Groff quilt it for me, and then I sewed the edge and then hand sewed the back, you know, to finish it off. But she picked out the colors, and we sure enjoy it. She does too.
This is a Quilt of Valor. Quilts of Valor were started in 2003, and it was given at the Walter Reed Medical Center to a soldier who had lost his leg. Since then, they are made, they have to be red, white, and blue, and our Wamego Quilt of Valor Guild, we have to give 25 of them in April to the Honor Flight veterans. And then we honor people in different areas of Potawatomi, Wabunsee, Lyon, and Morris County. Those are the 4 counties we have. They have to be, the smallest can be 55 by 65. The preferred is 60 by 80. And the largest is 72 by 90. Now, our guild buys fabric wholesale, because we have Pam Flock from Paxico, who has a quilt business. And you can go check it out, and then you have to give the quilt. Okay? The mission is to honor service members that are active or veterans, but they must be awarded, not just gifted to them. We wrap the veteran in the quilt, wrap him in love. Okay, so there is a presentation. Now, this was a panel. And then I had all these scrappy red, white, and blue pieces, and I cut them in 1.5-inch squares, and made these. Well, then I had to figure out how to fit it around, so I used scrappy yellow fabric to make the corners so that the squares would fit around. And then I just used fabric for the borders. I hand quilted it.
Now, do they all have this on the back?
Yes, there has to be a label on the back. Once it is awarded, it will say to whom and a date. Then it says pieced by, so if you're a piecer, quilted by, it could be machine quilted or long arm quilted by a professional or whatever. I write hand quilted and my name, and then binding by. And next week I will go pick up several quilts that somebody else pieced, somebody else quilted, and they don't know how to put the binding on, so I will do that. And then it is gifted.
It's kind of interesting, she quilted it in thread colors to match, so the back is as interesting as the front.
Yeah, so there's red, or there's blue, or there's white thread. And sometimes I use variegated, whatever's in the storage unit.
It makes the back as interesting as the front.
Yes, it can do that. Now, we would welcome anyone to join the Wamego Quilt of Valor group, guild. It costs you $15 a year. That has to go to the state guild and some to the national. So, and then as we donate them, we get a lot of contributions, and that's how we buy the fabric for you to use. Or you can buy it yourself, keep the receipts, and take it off your taxes as a donation. Okay, any other questions? Please see me if you're interested in joining the guild.
I'm Betty Smith, and I'm Nancy Hubbard's sister, youngest sister, and I'm from Halstead, Kansas. And I'm not good about speaking off the top of my head, so this inspiration, I'll let you hold it. The inspiration behind this queen-size butterfly quilt was my mom, Marjorie Kazitz, who passed away in 2009. My sister Nancy Hubbard had made a small quilt out of the squares that my mom had originally made. My mom had machine appliqued the butterfly wings and satin stitched the bodies and antennas by hand. Anyway, there were a lot of butterfly wings traced that had never been cut out. So I decided in 2019 that I would attempt to make a quilt out of all the leftover vintage material. This was my first attempt at making a quilt. I machine appliqued the wings and the body, which was made by black fabric, and then I satin stitched the antennas. My sister helped me piece the quilt blocks together. I hand drew the leaves around each butterfly and hand quilted them. For the border, I hand drew leaves and butterflies and hand quilted them also. There were 8 butterfly squares that my mom had originally 100% made, which we made into the pillow shams. And this is a queen-size quilt. It took me about 2 years to make this. I'm not a fast quilter, but someday this will go to my only granddaughter. Very good.
Questions? That completes the quilt turns on the first table, so Barb Depew is going to pick your brains a little bit.
I am. I hope that you've looked at your program today, that on the back of that there is a few rounds of charming quilt facts. So I'd like to share the first round of those with you, and I will go ahead and read what the statement is, and that if any of you have an answer that you think is the right answer for that, if you'll raise your hand. So the first is, the word quilt is derived from the Latin word colcita, which means, anyone? Stuffed sack. That is what the word quilt means. So what culture has the earliest depiction of quilting?
Romans.
Put your head up real high.
Nope.
Chinese.
Nope. Well, the Europeans, so whoever said Middle East. The Europeans actually were settlers that brought quilting to the Americas, and the earliest known quilt made in America was actually from 1704.
Does someone get a ticket?
Okay, so I think, did the answer come from over here? Right there, okay. So you get to enter a drawing, so that's a free ticket for your drawing. Okay, number 3. Quilted clothing was worn under a knight's armor to keep it from?
Chafing.
Okay, that's one answer, so Jean gets one.
From what?
From chafing, rubbing them.
Oh.
What's another?
Warm.
That's Jean.
Warm.
Nope.
Sweating.
Rusting.
No.
Okay.
And who was the other one that got one?
Tess and Jean. Okay. During the expansion of the western U.S., what were some of the uses for quilts other than for warmth?
They put them over their windows.
Okay, shelter would be one. Okay.
The slave.
The Underground Railroad.
Yeah.
All right. Well, actually, there's another one that I have here listed. Think about their homes.
Hanging as a door.
Right. Doors, windows over here, and then the shelter was the other protection. I didn't see who. I heard shelter somewhere, right over there in the middle. Okay, we'll do one more. So put your thinking caps on. What year was the earliest known quilt made in America?
1705.
Raise your hands. Anybody? No, it was actually before that. I don't know if any of you will get this one. It's actually 3,400 BC. The earliest depiction of quilting was discovered in Egypt. It was an ivory figurine of a pharaoh wearing quilted clothing, circa 3,400 BC.
In America. You've got
Okay.
America.
Oh,
I think you got
okay.
2 and 5 mixed up.
Probably so. Okay.
1704.
1704 America, and then the Egyptians. Then.
Did somebody get 1704?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
And
Okay.
what was the BC?
3,400 BC, actually. All right, so we'll have round 2 a little later. Thank you, guys. And do work on your mixer also.
We'll take about a 15-20 minute break. We're moving along really nicely today. Before you leave, if someone at your table could let our servers know what flavor of tea you would like to have back in your teapot, that would be great, and they will fill that. And then your glasses, what do we want? We are going to toast Kansas after break, so we would like to put a punch in your glasses so you can drink the rest of your water. Have an empty glass. We will toast the birthday of Kansas. Before I let you go, some of you have probably seen this. The cost of making a quilt. With pattern, $12. Top, 6 yards at $12, $72. Back, 6 yards at $12, $72. Batting, $15. Binding, $7.50. Thread, $10. Now, I'm not sure how big a quilt that is and how fancy it is, but that comes to $188.50. How many of you think you've spent that much money on quilt fabric? How many of you spent more than that? If you have, wave.
That's another question.
And then the construction, the top 50 hours would be, if you value your time, and how many of you don't value your time because it scares you, would be $750. Assembling the quilt is 3 hours at $45, and see, that's only $15 an hour. That's not what the going rate for labor is right now. Quilting, $63.38. Making the binding, $30. Attaching the binding, 10 hours. $150, and quilting thread, $15. So your quilt, in the end, is an heirloom, so it's priceless, right? It has to be priceless because it cost you $1,053.38. Now, how many of you if you told your spouse or your significant, you just spent $1,000 to make a quilt, they would be really excited for you. So when we have quilts come in once in a while to the garage sale, it almost seems like it's a sacrilege because of the love, number one, the love that went into it, but the financial investment of it. So with that, we will take a break till about 2:20 or so. That gives you a chance to look at the door prizes if you haven't. A chance to look at the quilt blocks that the students at Onega designed. It wasn't all students. If some of you aren't aware, after when the kids went back second semester, they didn't get to go back every day. So our art teacher didn't see some of her classes to ask them to make a block for us. The blue one is the kindergartners, and then the other two are primarily junior high and senior high art students that designed those. We do have the tickets for the Ukraine quilt, and please don't forget the free will donation merchandise. If you're out of treats at your table and you need more treats, be sure to let the servers know that. So, enjoy, and the quilts are out over here. If you want to peer at them a little more and see the techniques, feel free to do that. So, with that, I'll let you go.
The Kansas. Happy birthday to
you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Kansas. Happy birthday to you.
And then we're going to sing the state song. Everybody knows it, don't you? Oh, give me a hole
where the buffalo roam, where the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy all day. Home on the range, where the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy all day.
Raise your glasses to the yellow state of sunflowers in Kansas. Salute. Cheers. Cheers. Cheers.
If you, I don't know if there's extra or not, but if you want some more, ask one of the servers.
I don't. You just come out. Thank you. There are multiple versions.
When I was teaching for Kansas Day, I always read the same poem, and the kids would memorize it sometimes and say it, and some of you that have been in here the previous 2 years have heard this, but it's called the Kansan. Whenever you meet a Kansan, I care not where it may be, under the pines of the forest, out on the waves of the sea. Whenever you speak of Kansas, his eyes will the brighter glow, for every Kansan loves the land where the sunflowers grow. And so with that, we give tribute to our Kansas birthday today. And if our quilt turners want to step onto the stage, we'll continue with the next bed of quilts.
It's Herman's birthday, and I haven't texted him. My morning got away from me. I try to do that.
Kathy's gone?
I know.
She's back.
Yeah.
Oh, here she is. No, she's not back. Okay.
I think the lady, she and the owner was she's out of here. Let her look it up. Oh, I think she's right behind you.
Right here.
Hi, I'm Anita Leonard, and I am from Topeka. Let me tell you, for an experienced quilter, you're going to see that these Dresden plates don't exactly look symmetrical. My sister and I decided, I was 12, she was 13, no, she was 15. We were going to make a quilt just like Grandma's, like Grandma made my mother when she got married. So this is a 12-year-old me making these quilts, these blocks, and the fabric is all from the 60s because my sister and I used to sew. And so those were clothes that we made, so that's all like a polyester blend. And we got all the blocks done. I got half, she got half. We were going to make 2 quilts. She just said, I'm done. She gave me her quilt blocks. And so I had these. I took what left of the petals and the quilt blocks that we had gotten finished, put them in a brown paper bag, rolled it up, and carried it around for 55 years. So the only time I was not in possession of these blocks is when I went to college. So when I got out of college, got my first apartment, I took those with me. Got married, got our first duplex, took them with me. So for 55 years, these blocks have been in a brown paper bag. And last year I looked at that and I thought, I really need to think about doing something with that. So you look at the polyester and you're thinking, okay, what am I going to do to match this? So anyway, I just tried to pick out some 60s floral stuff that I could find, and I made my quilt. So flower power on the back. Yeah, thank you. I think the next one's mine too.
You want to keep it, or the next one's mine?
Okay, this one is mine too. And I have a thing about going to flea markets and estate sales. Hold it up. Oh, okay, and looking at stuff that's unfinished. Well, I bought for like $20 this quilt top that was not finished. I brought it home and I tried to lay it on the floor to try to see if I could get it squared up, and my daughter helped me. We could, no matter what we did, we could not get this thing to lay flat. So the only thing I could do is I had to pick it all apart, square by square. And the squares went all the way from 11.5-inch square to 18.5-inch square. So some poor quilter just was starting and gave up, and I could understand why. So I was able to, I just squared them up, and then I put all the stitching on every seam, which is kind of fun because I've never used every little stitch that I had on my machine. And so I had a good time doing that. And so I finished it off and then just tied it.
That's great.
There's just a lot of stuff out there that we can finish.
Got it.
Dee, are you going to share? I want you to play this one.
This was my mom. My mom made this in 1990. I just found it in the corner that she'd signed it. She made, I'm not sure how many of these. These are ties, men's ties. And I have one and my daughter has one. I don't know if all my brothers got one or not. So I don't know how many she made, but she made these in 1990.
Did you just get her ties from like Goodwill and places like that?
Okay, I'm Mae Wagner, and when I got divorced from my ex-husband Kenny, my mom asked me what I wanted for Christmas, and I said I need wrenches because he took all the wrenches. And I'm a do-it-yourself person, and besides that, I was always broke. So Mom gave me this for Christmas, and it's called the Monkey Wrench Quilt. So years later, I cherish the quilt, and I have my own wrenches. I guess I should add, many of you will know my mother is Dorothy Wagner. She hung paper in practically everybody's house. And she machines patched, but hand quilted this quilt.
Oh, that's what it was. Debbie? She's coming. These are
I'm reading this for Kathy Blair, Kathy Rizak Blair, and this is what she wrote about this top. Joanne Rizak, age 47, got her arm caught in a baler, and after 26 surgeries, cut and hand sewed the many blocks together to make grandmother's flower garden for her granddaughter. This quilt top was constructed between 1982 and 1983. She used new fabrics and cut and constructed each block as she went. The pattern came from an old pamphlet that she had. She worked on these blocks everywhere she went. It was a great way to pass the time and give her back the use of her hand. She also made a completed queen-size quilt in shades of green for Virginia Rizak prior to this one. Virginia's quilt burned in her home fire in 1984. Today, Joan is 89 years old and has macular degeneration and is unable to finish this quilt for her granddaughter. Now, the interesting thing with this quilt is all of these little tiny squares, these hexagon, yeah, they're not square, are hand sewn. Every single one of them. And if you look at the back, I mean, there's just no seam at all. And to have done this, and so Kathy's mission is to go ahead and finish it for Joanne and award it to the granddaughter. She was not able to be here today and wanted me to share that with all of you.
Yeah. Well, this is another Dulce Martin one. This one was presented to David and I when we got married. She'd given us a different one for a wedding shower gift, which I thought was wonderful, treasured it, and when I got this for a wedding gift, I was just beyond amazed. It's the wedding ring, and so we've had this for 45 years. And I believe in using things that people have given me, because I figure that's why they give it to me. So most of our quilts just get, rearranged every once in a while. I'll get tired of one and put up another. So it's not in the most perfect condition, but it's in a loved condition. So this was another one by Delta.
Is it pinned or something? Yes, it is. This thing is huge.
Oh, that's what the bill is. Okay. This quilt was embroidered by my mother-in-law, Olga Fairbanks. She was an Abbott's. She made embroidered quilts for everybody, at least one for everybody in the family. And then I believe Sue Martindale hand quilted it for us. Sorry, can't hear you. What part do you want me to repeat? This was all of it? Okay, this was hand embroidered by Olga Fairbanks. She was an Abbott's. She is my mother-in-law. She hand embroidered, stamped embroidered quilt squares for everybody in the family. Pretty much everybody's got one. And then Sue Martindale quilted it for us, hand quilted.
Who set it together?
Sue put it, actually Sue Alquist, I believe, put it together. And then Sue Martindale quilted it. So,
Very neat.
I think it's a
The show.
Okay, I'm Linda Rodenkamp, but I was a Steinlage, and this is a hand cross-stitched, hand quilted, and sewn by my mother. Probably, when she was kind of retiring, I guess in the 80s, maybe 90 even. But she would order, well, I'll go back. I think she kind of self-taught herself. Maybe, I don't know a whole lot of history, because Grandma never really did any quilting as such. She sewed clothes for us, and my mom was of 9 children during the Depression. Grandma had to raise them all, so she was busy doing that. So I think Mom learned some of this down at Kansas City, actually, where she had to go for during the Depression years. And she made a lot of quilts. The cross stitch, I just love the patterns. She would buy kits from Lee Ward's.
Yeah.
And so that's my mom.
This one's got the show front and back.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm Steve Staley. This quilt, my wife did the embroidery here on the front. It was made for my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. But my idea on the back, we laid the thing out on the table and we had people sign their names to it as a little extra remembrance for their anniversary. And so you do not have to be a quilter, because I am not a quilter. I enjoy them, but that is the extent of it. And my wife did the quilting, or the piecing on all the quilting then.
Your mom did the cross stitch?
No, my wife did.
Your wife? Oh, okay, she's right there.
She's the one that did all the, if you remember the state quarters quilt from last year?
I have a picture of that, yes.
Well, she's the one that did the cross stitch here. So. That's her.
Okay, ready for some more?
The last one, you do the next set of.
Okay.
Geraldine, why don't you wave your hand so we know who did the work? And we'll go to the second set of questions on your brochure.
Okay. All right, so I think these might be maybe a little bit easier this round for everybody. What is the main reason quilting bees were held in the Midwest during the 1800s? Raise your hand.
Entertainment.
Socializing, yes, yes. So Phyllis gets one of those for that one. Okay. And then number 7, a quilt is made of 3 layers. Can you name them? D?
Top, batting, backing.
All right.
Who got the first one?
One there and one right here. Okay. Now, the crazy quilt was introduced during Victorian times. What was its purpose?
To show off their intricate stitches.
I need a little more. The crazy quilt. The crazy quilt was introduced during Victorian times in order to showcase their what?
It's to use up their scraps.
No, actually it was a sign of wealth. So these women used, and if you remember seeing crazy quilt, expensive fabrics when they did those, like velvet, silk, and brightly colored thread to make them. So it's a sign of wealth. All right. The most expensive quilt ever sold was a Civil War piece purchased in 1991 for how much? Pardon? No.
690,000.
690,000? No, it's less than that.
400.
Today's number.
250,000?
Yes, actually. It was $254,000 in 1991, and the equivalent today is $470,000 for that one. Alice Walker, a Pulitzer Prize winner, wrote the famous short story book about quilting. What was it called? Anybody?
Was it piecing time?
No. Everyday Use was the name of the book. All right, that's round 2.
That book here.
No. Oh, the quilt book.
We're going to each just show up one of the and stand in a row.
Okay. While we're getting ready for our next layer quilts, I'm going to direct your attention over here. This particular quilt was given to the Onega Historical Society raffle off. Well, it was given to us by Regina Grunwaller, who had won it at the Onega Senior Center, and the quilter was Delta Martin. And how many of you have heard Delta Martin's name today? Quite a bit. Well, in our meeting last week, several people said, well, there's greater value in things than just money. And the decision was made to keep Delta's quilt and to add it to our collection in our museum. And the neat thing is, how many of you have heard Mandy Honey mentioned today, where people went to quilt? Well, Delta also quilted at Mandy at Honey Mercantile. And eventually we'll have some things from Honey Mercantile to display in our museum, and then we'll be able to begin to add our local quilters, like Delta Martin, that our generation, hopefully the next couple of generations, kind of remember. Plus, there's all kinds of relatives of Deltas that will be able to come to our museum and view Delta's work. And so we felt that that was, the membership felt there was a greater need to keep the quilt and keep that legacy going in our town. So this is our latest quilt that has been added to the Onega Historical Society quilt collection.
I want to take just a second to thank Debbie Burgess, my son. Somehow she got him involved in the Historical Society when he was in in early high school. And the kid can tell me more history of Onega, Kansas, and more history of the Martin family because of all the work he did at the Historical Society. So you younger children that are here, wonderful place to volunteer. You learn so much. It's such a help to them, and I really want to thank them for giving him his start and his love of Onega and what it has to offer. So thank you for enlisting his help over the years.
Well, since you all mentioned Mandy Honig, when I was pregnant with our third son, or our third child, we were on our way to the hospital to have him, but I needed some buttons. And so we had to stop at Mandy's and get buttons, and I was in pretty heavy labor at that point in time. And Mandy, we went on up to the hospital then, and he was born, and Mandy was convinced, she told everybody that my water broke in her store. So anyway, she was just so proud that I was in there that morning. But anyway, so these are 4 different quilts made by the same lady. I grew up in northeast or north central Kansas, and this lady's name was Auntie Colson, but you know, I was just a little kid and I thought her name was Annie, A-N-N-I-E. Her nephew always called her Auntie, but I missed the T part. So Annie Colson made these and gave us these quilt tops when we were growing up. Annie was probably early 90s when I met her. She couldn't see the thread or needle on her sewing machine, and so when we would go there, and we always worked cattle on horseback, and when we would go there with our horses or do whatever, I probably was with her because I wasn't very good help. But anyway, I would help her thread her needle. But as you look at these, every single piece has been hand sewn. There's, and you know, when I got these, I didn't realize what a treasure they were. I think there's 4 of them because there were 4 of us kids. But somehow I ended up with all 4 pieces. And I'm not giving them back. So, you know, right of ownership. They were in my mom's cedar chest evidently for years, and then they moved to mine. I would love to have some ideas on how to put these together. I don't want to cut anything apart, but I would love to put these together and make a quilt, not me, of course, but somebody. And but I have great memories of working cattle and going to the Ionia Tavern and having great pop and, well, the adults drank beer, but you know, everybody hung out in the taverns back then. And so, and then we'd go to Annie's house, and she was, I think she came across the prairie in a covered wagon. Like I said, she was in her 90s when we met her. So. Paper that's right there.
One thing about Rosie, how many of you know she is an author?
Oh, yes.
Okay. If you don't know that, she is completing a series, a Western series. And I think probably if you were interested in the book, she probably has some in her car, knowing Rosie. And she has written, I don't know how many children's books. 11, and lots of times those come out around Christmas time. And she is embarking on a series on the Civil War. And I think what she's finding is there's a ton of information out there, and how do you piece it all together? So we're excited for that. I was asked I had to speak for Julie Schmidt. She called this morning and someone took a call for her, and she has lost her voice, and that person says, I couldn't hardly hear her. This quilt is a quilt that is in our museum. It was gifted to us by Julie, her mother, Lucille Burgess, was the Grand Matron of the Eastern Star chapter here in Onega for a time. And during her tenure as the Grand Matron, she had each of the members embroidery a block, and then she put the quilt together. And gosh, I didn't write down who she had quilted. There's a real, is it on there?
I was going to say.
Is it on the back?
There's something on the thank you page.
Okay. Oh gosh, I wish I could remember her name. For those of you from Onega would know the lady. And I'll probably think about it tonight about 11 o'clock when I go to bed. So I'll write it down and tell you next year. The interesting thing on this quilt, it is a historical document. I'm going to read you the names of some of the people that have a square. I think you will recognize them. Elvina Grossnickel, Romaine Millick, Dorothy Knipp, Sherry Force, Ida Butler, Florence Linebaugh, Garland Myers, Thelma Thompson, Marguerite Inglesby, Johnny Grossnickel, Sister Lucille Burgess, Richard H. Juneau was the chaplain, Myrtle Marshall, Letha Hardy, Irene Juneau, Ted Thompson, and Millard H. Marshall, and Julie Schmidt. And just a couple of those people are still, well, 4 maybe, are still with us. But it speaks to some people that were important to our community and to an organization that was very active at one time. So I was pleased that Julie would go ahead and ask me to share that information with you and the quilt. So that's... While they're getting ready for the last quilts, this is a book we bought for the museum. It's called Kansas Spirit, and it is 15 historical quilt blocks and the saga of the Sunflower State. It has some really neat designs in there. I'll just put it up here if anybody wants to look at it during our next break. We were hoping to get that author to be our guest speaker today, but I can never make contact with her. And while we're talking about a guest speaker, we were going to have Marla Day come and talk about how to clean quilts. How many of you struggled with what to do with quilts? Especially old quilts, and we've got a couple over there that, well, May can speak to the old quilts and what Marla recommends. Well, she went to Germany to help her daughter move. Didn't book a flight back when she went because she didn't know how long it would take her to do what she needed to do. Well, the documentation of booking a flight back didn't go as she expected. So she may still be in Germany at this time, I'm not sure.
Oh, there you are. Hi, I'm Jane McNeed from Topeka. This quilt is another example of a flower garden made by my grandmother, and the pieces are bigger than the previous one we saw, but she again entirely hand pieced this whole quilt and then hand quilted it. And I'm pretty sure it was made, well, in the 50s, 60s. I recognize, I can date some of my grandmother's quilts based on, they were from some of the garments that either my mom made for me, the dresses, or ones that I made for myself. But we found this, she actually made this for her son, who passed away a few years ago, and we found it in a closet, wrapped up, thank goodness. He never used it, so it looks brand new. Yeah.
Keep it so beautifully.
Well, because it was never used for 50, 60 years, so I was thrilled to find it.
Those are so bright.
Yeah, yeah. That's sunbonnet.
Oh, yeah, we can get it. Get it? The sunbonnet set?
Yeah, yeah.
This one? Yeah, the sunbonnet
No,
set.
the sunbonnet.
Oh, the sunbonnet. Okay, I didn't realize that. I'm sorry. We tried to catch them, but we'll get them all.
And this was made by a great aunt, and I'm pretty sure that it was made for me when I was a baby, and it's one of those questions you wish you'd asked your mom before she passed away, but it's all hand done too, and the quilting is just teeny tiny stitches, and I got to put this on my bed when I was a small girl, only on very special occasions. So it too is in pretty good shape. Yeah.
She's coming. I'm coming. You're fine.
Aunt Dorothy cross-stitched these blocks. Aunt Dorothy does beautiful embroidery work. And Aunt Dorothy...
What's the last name?
Guth. Guth, yes. And Aunt Dorothy made all of her great-grandchildren either a Sunbonnet Sue or a Sam quilt, and then did all the blocks. But anyway, she did these blocks and had them done for a long time, and she told me a couple years ago that she needed to do something so that they wouldn't just end up in a bag after she was gone. And she saw in a magazine or a catalog, someone had done these blocks and just sewed them all together and didn't put sashing in between. So she did the blocks, she sewed the blocks together, and she had Donna Goring quilted it for her and put the border fabric on. And I picked out the fabric for her when I was in McPherson.
Yeah.
And
when you can barely see where she put the blocks together.
oh yeah, yeah, there is quite a story about that. When she put these together, you know, on embroidery blocks, how you see along the edge of blue ink.
Yeah.
Well, after she put them together, you could see that blue ink. So then she took the blocks apart, and then she how many times did she put the blocks together? 3 times? It was a lot. But the result is just beautiful. And they're done. And I think originally this was supposed to be for a grandson, for Dusty.
He isn't married yet.
He's not married.
Because his wife might appreciate
Yeah. Okay. This one's
I'll hold this side. You want to get that?
Okay, back when I was a kid, we used to have really rough winters. And when you don't have TV, and we didn't even have running water, so you can imagine, this is what my mom pieced together, and then my sister Pat and I, and Mom of course, quilted. The quilt frame was in the living room, never got put up. You just walked around it. It was there if you wanted to do something, if you wanted to be entertained, you quilted, and that was it. So we were snowed in for weeks. If you know where the Wagner family farm is, you know those roads get cleaned out last. So this is the one from my childhood.
About what year?
It would have been done in the late 50s. Yeah, because I think we got TV when I was 11 or 12, so.
It was before that, I was gonna say.
Then the quilting ended? Yeah, the quilting ended. This was presented to my great-grandmother, Elda and Guy, and they were married. This is a marriage quilt in 1910. They moved to Minnesota in 1912 and lived in an embankment till he could get his homestead cabin built. And so it did get some use, being they were homesteading in northern Minnesota, about 5 miles from the Canadian border. Grandma Loretta, who made it for her son and daughter-in-law, came to visit. And lo and behold, this quilt was on the bed. It was being used. And she scolded Elda for using it. So I tell everyone when I make a quilt, please use it, snuggle in it, cuddle in it, and use it. And yes, this has seen lots of use.
My great grandma Smith made this. I don't know what to say. Great grandma Smith is my mom's step grandmother because my mom's dad died. And no, I'm telling that wrong. I'm sorry. My mom's dad's mom died. Yes, and so then the father remarried, and so it was the step grandma. But she would actually be biological grandma to Rosemary Weiss. And even though she wasn't, biological grandma, great grandma, I always heard she was a very special lady, and so I heard that she raised her, my grandpa as her own son. So I don't have anything to say about the quilt really.
Looks like it's hand-pieced and hand-quilted.
Yes.
And a lot of these are sort of puffy here.
Yeah, they are textured kind of, gathered in the middle and made it, So my mom has this hanging on the wall in her living room, and she threatened my life when I walked out of the house with it.
Well, make sure you're safe.
She's got 2 more.
Yeah. That's right. We're trying to get the tag down there.
And this was on my mom's bed, and my dad asked, am I going to bring his blanket back? And I said, yes, I'll bring it right back. So this was made by Minnie Wilhelmina Abbott's Martin, and after talking to Deanna, I found out it's her husband's great aunt. And what do I say about it? It was the blocks were put together by Sue Martindale, and then Sue hand quilted it.
They're hand put together.
Yes.
You can see them. Yeah.
Yes. But Minnie hand pieced the blocks.
Yes.
Yes. And what else do I say about it? I don't know. Okay.
Got 1 more.
This is, I call it a sloppy one because it's very not done well. They just used all different kinds of stitching and different colors of thread, and I don't know. Because it's done so poorly, it just makes me wonder what is the story. I feel like there's a story with it, and what I imagine is that the family had just gotten their sewing machine and they wanted to learn how to use the sewing machine. So there's nothing, it is so like there's this black thread running through there and zigzags some places and I don't, it's a practice, yeah, or maybe a child was learning to use the machine or, I don't know, but.
How did your family acquire?
So someone in the Martin family made it. My great-grandma Marie Martin Teskey, or maybe her mother, Wilhelmina Abbots Martin, or one of the sisters. We just don't know. Yes. Yes. So, okay.
Loretta? We got the last
This quilt was put together by my mother-in-law and her mother, and it was started, there's a date on it, 1909, I think. And when she was little, she could go to the store and she could buy the embroidery floss, and it was turkey red, and she would draw pictures off of magazines and that kind of, see, here is 1913 here, and then she would embroider them. I mean, she was born in 1902, so she was fairly small, started them when she was real little. I think some of the easier ones here was when she was little, and then as she got a little older and practiced, because they didn't have television, they didn't have radio, they didn't have much for books. Little girls learned how to do this early on, how to piece all the little pieces. And it's, I'm assuming it's hand pieced and hand quilted. And I still have 6 blocks that have never been put in anything, that it was made at the same time, so we need to get that put together at some point. But she has the dog, Carlo, and all the little pictures that they drew off of magazines.
I have to ask, this has 2 kittens and it says attention.
Yeah, I have no idea. I did not ask about that. But all the different designs, this is how the little girls learned how to quilt. And see, some of the cats are upside down from the other ones, you know. Just, and I don't know what the name of the pattern is. Yes. And it was worn a lot. Now, this one is very old, very fragile. If you turn it over, it has a new back to it, and it has 1930 on it. But we've all been listening to and hearing a lot about Delta Martin today. This is I don't know why this quilt was made. I don't know, but some of the names on them, one of them is Delta Zabel. So this was before Delta was married.
Where is that?
And Lorna Zabel here. No, it's a smaller one, I think. Yeah, and there's Mrs. Panay, which I don't know if that was Eli's wife, because they owned the land right south of where one of our farms was. It has, down here, where is it? Elsie Frazier, Kilowatt's wife. She was a cousin, because her grandfather was a Zabel, or her mother was a Zabel, or something. Here's Minnie Wag, who was married to Fred. That would have been Hannah's mother-in-law, Lavina, which is Lavina Wag. That would have been Hannah's daughter, and she's still living north of town. She's 94, I think now. Hannah Wag.
Material from the dresses?
I really don't know, but there's lots of names that I don't recognize, but some of them, Cecilia Rush. But it's been so worn, there's pieces that are just totally falling apart. You would not want to even try to wash it now, which, maybe at some time in the past, but it's been tucked away in a cedar chest for a really long time, but you can't really part with it. And some of the names, I have no clue who they are. And some of the places where embroidering is like coming out. What is this one? It's a Honey. Carrie? Oh, Carrie Haug, not Honey. Carrie Haug. But some of the names, I don't have any idea. Adeline Wagner.
So what year?
She had embroidered on the back corner 1930, but now the back has been replaced, so she must have added that on after she replaced it, because it just wore out. It was well loved. And they were married in 1922, so they would have been married 8 years, so it's not a wedding quilt.
My mother-in-law has a quilt of that type at home. Their sewing club got together and made it. And different ladies would bring the different pieces or the different blocks, and then they would sign their name in the middle.
Yes,
That
yes.
might be
And
similar, I'm not sure.
usually they were done for a particular event in someone's life. I have no idea, what this was, but it's so fragile and it's so, you just hate to even, move it around too much. But considering that it has Delta on there as a Zabel. So this was before she married Lawrence and before they had Ronnie and Kenny and David and all the grandkids. And do you know what year they got married? Kathy?
They had celebrated for 45 or something. I got together, so about 90 years.
Yeah, I don't know.
So, yeah, I think we're pretty close on that 1930.
Yeah.
For those of you that know Loretta, we could be here till midnight. And
Symposium.
I do want, while Loretta's up here, those little cookies at the top of your centerpieces, the Coffee Barn, Loretta made all those cookies for us. So let's give her a round of applause for all those cookies. And while we're talking about refreshments, is Donna still here? We need all of the scones and the little savories and everything is a result of Robin Colderman and Donna Flowers. So give them a round of applause. So I'll let you sit down. We do have some quilts over here that we would like to just mention a couple of things in May.
The one in the middle hanging up, I found at the Wagner family farm, which was a homestead farm, and I had it dated, and they said late.
5% tracing or marking things. 18% seam ripping. Now, how many of you think that's low? I think it's low.
The beginner or the advanced person?
I can't read that. 5% actually error. How many of you find your vision changes suddenly on you? Has nothing to do with alcohol. How many of you spend 10% of your time troubleshooting your machine? There is that. That might be a little low too. Especially if you're trying to teach a granddaughter to sew. It's jammed all the time, isn't it? 5% of your time is actually spent in sewing. All the rest of it is in preparing things. Now, I think I spend 5% threading my needle now. How many of you would agree with that? I think I need a stronger magnifying glass or something. We have some models here today. The grand prize, after we do all the door prizes, we're going to dump all the extra tickets into a great big ice cream bucket. And the grand prize winner will get to choose one of these quilting shawls that are made by, primarily Jamie Cottrell. That's part of our Crafting for Others group. So our first model is Lily Weiser. And notice the pockets on these shawls, so that if you need, have a Kleenex with you, maybe a scissors, I think our thimbles would fall through there. This is our first shawl. Our next shawl is being modeled by Sally Miller. And you'll get to choose one of these quilter shawls. We weren't sure which one the person would think. Once again, notice the colors in the pocket. So you have a place to place your things. Our next model is Johnny Bradley. Nice Christmassy quilter's shawl. And our final model of the shawls is Allie Perry. And she's got her hands stuffed down in there. I must say that Janie makes really, really warm shawls. So through the winter months when you are quilting and maybe don't want to turn up the heat, the shawl will take care of that for you. So that will be one of the, you can choose one of those as our final prize. Now, one of our prizes over there on the table, door prizes, is a dress. Faith Perry is going to try to model this a little bit. This dress comes from Linda Rodenkamp, and I tried my best to get her to put it on and model it for us, and have her husband come in his Hawaiian swimsuit trunks and escort her, and they refused. But this is a really pretty size tan dress. It has a shawl that goes with it, and it also has a sarong, whatever, that goes around the waist. And so I did want you to see that as one of our prizes, because it was kind of hard to say. It's never been worn, the tags are still on it. So thank you very much. I don't think that's what she thought she'd have to do when she came today. So with that, I'm going to give, there is plenty, is there juice still out? Punch. Punch? If you have it put away, we won't open the punch up. But if you, be sure to eat the refreshments at your table. If you want a little more tea, a little more punch, I'm going to give you about 10 minutes if you want to come over and look at these last grouping of quilts.
And finish your mixer.
And finish your mixer, yes. The mixer needs to go into this basket. 10 minutes and back, and we'll do all the prizes then. Thank you.